Hey, what is up, guys? Tremaine Hayho here. I'm here to talk about Star Wars The Last Jedi. What did I think of it? Was it good? Was it bad? Let's jump right into it. So, first off, boom, let's get this poster here going. Yeah, so what I want to do for you guys is a bit more movie reviews. By the way, this is sponsored by Rideshare. If you guys didn't know, I'm making a movie. Huge update coming soon on Rideshare, so be tuned. Be tuned, stay tuned. I don't know, be tuned and stay tuned, guys, for Rideshare, the movie coming up. You can see the trailer on my channel. A lot more info coming up about that, but we're not here to talk about Rideshare. We're here to talk about Star Wars. Star Wars. The Last Jedi. Now, what did I think of this movie? This movie is This movie is a letdown. This movie is not a good movie. Not only is it not a good movie, I would go as far to say is a bad movie. It is a bad movie. That being said, I didn't hate the movie. I didn't even dislike the movie. I just see it for as it is. It is just not a good movie. And before you go and cuss me out or disown me or unfriend me or whatever, of course you're welcome to do that. We live in a free country, right? Um, Let me explain why. We're going to actually talk about since Star Wars isn't all bad and it isn't all good either. It has some ugly moments as well. So we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly for Star Wars. Look at this, guys. Look at this. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Even though three of those characters, none of these characters are in Star Wars anymore, which is sad. Very sad, guys. But we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because I do think this is a bad movie, and just judging by my years of experience, I love movies. I love Star Wars. I saw Star Wars when I was a kid. I fell in love with it. I've seen all of the Star Wars movies, and for the most part, I really like pretty much all of them. Rogue One, I wasn't really a big fan of, but there was still enough in it that I really did like that made it worthwhile for me. And for this movie. It's obviously it's worth seeing, guys. It's not. I'm not gonna say it's not worth seeing. Definitely go out and see it. You probably have already seen it. People are pretty mixed about this movie. People either love it or they hate it. For me, I don't hate it. I just don't think it's a good movie, and I'm gonna get into details as to why. Again, not saying that there wasn't parts that I didn't like. There were parts that I really liked about this movie, and I want to dive into. There's also parts that I didn't really like about this movie, and then there's parts that were just bad or ugly. They were just those ugly scenes where it's like, really, that just happened. Now, I'm all for taking the movie into a new direction. I'm all for taking Star Wars, revamping it, rehashing it, let's throw some new things in there. Let's make some bold moves. And this movie definitely did have some of that. It had some bold moves, but at other times I was just like, well, was that a bold move because it serves the storyline, or was this a bold move just to say that, oh, it's a bold move, right? And for the most part, it seemed to be the latter of the two. Let's go to Ryan Johnson. Ryan Johnson, what is up, man? Looking good. Looking very serious right there. Now, Ryan Johnson, if you guys didn't know, directed a couple movies that we know and a couple movies that we don't know. He directed a movie called Looper a few years ago, and that was received pretty well. Majority of audiences really like this movie. A lot of critics really like this movie. I saw the movie and I wasn't a huge fan of it. I didn't like it that much, but I didn't dislike it. Again, like it had some interesting elements to it. To me, there wasn't enough that I had really liked, nor do I even really remember in it. I remember Bruce Willis and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, of course, but other than that, I don't really remember much about that movie. So what does that have to say about the movie? not much. The other movie called Brick, which I saw years before Looper, is a fantastic movie. It's one of his first movies ever. Fantastic high school. I'd almost like to say it's like a brand new. It's like a new noir movie. Even though it's over a decade old now, I think it's like it came out 2003 ish or whatever. I remember seeing it and really liking it. So I'm like, okay, you know what? I think he could give a fresh take to Star Wars, and I'm interested in seeing what else he does. And for the most part, though, he's 2 of 4. He's made these 2 other movies. I can't even remember the names of them that came out, and they really tanked. Um, if you guys can help me out in the comments below, or maybe I will find those later and put those in the comments below. Both those movies tanked, though. So for me, he's out of the 4 movies, out of like the 4 bigger movies that he's made, one of them is like really good. The other one is like decent, like Looper's like decent. Brick is really good. The other 2 are completely forgettable, and from what I hear, completely unwatchable as well. But you know what? I go in. I had high hopes. I was a little bit wary of it. I don't want to expect. I don't want to go into a movie expecting it to be the best freaking thing since sliced bread. That is setting yourself up for failure. And there's a lot of people, for like a lot of Star Wars fans, that are like, "Oh my gosh, it's gonna be the best movie of all time." And as soon as it's not the greatest freaking movie of all time, they hate it. They go on message boards. "Oh, this is the worst movie. You're the worst director. You're an abomination." Da da da. Look, Ryan didn't ruin the series. He didn't freaking kill the series. I'm still going to watch pretty much all the new Star Wars movies, even if I like him, even if I don't like him. Um, and, he didn't ruin it. He didn't ruin the series. And saying that he did is being a little bit of a pansy, right? Look, like, not a lot of people like the prequels. I personally really enjoyed the prequels. Um, Attack the Clones for me was by far the weakest of the 3. But I really enjoyed Phantom Menace. Jar Jar Binks annoyed the hell out of me, even as a kid when I watched it. But I could look past it and see the movie as it is, which is really cool. Badass lightsaber scenes at the end. Um, the pod racing scene was badass. Like, there's a lot of stuff that was really cool in this movie. Naboo was really cool. The ships were really cool. Queen Amidala that whole storyline was awesome. Um, Seeing young Obi-Wan was really cool. Like, I love these characters, and I love that story. For this, it wasn't necessarily the case. Now let's talk about some of the good things. I don't want to tear it in just yet. So we've got one of my favorite characters of it is Leia, Princess Leia. Let's talk about the good things. She's the general. She's the leader of the resistance, right? And she's solid. Like, she's a solid actress. She brings that gravitas to Star Wars. Plus the fact that she had passed away last year, it added so much even more to the character. Like, oh my gosh, she's actually dead. She's leading this team. I was so down with her, even though she aged pretty horribly towards the end of her life. Drugs will do that to you. Um, she added a lot to it, and she added some humor. She had a couple of her kind of a dry sense of humor that she added, and I really liked that about her. Um, let's get into Finn. Finn, I actually really liked. Finn, he's a likable guy, likable character. I really like the scene when he's trying to abandon the ship, and then Rose meets him and is like, "Oh my gosh, you're such a hero! You did all these things. And he's like kind of hiding what he's doing, and turns out he's trying to ditch the ship." I thought that was a really good scene. The way he played it off was really well. John Boyega, really good actor. It's crazy because he has a British accent, but I thought he was American when it came out. And then I saw interviews with him. When Force Awakens came out, I thought he was American. Then I saw interviews with him. Oh my gosh, he's British. And I have so much respect for British actors that can create an American accent, more so than I see any other American actors that can do a British accent. So Finn was great. He was really cool, and I really liked him. Now let's get to the favorite part. of this. Did I even get him in here? Did I get him in here? He should be. Well, I'll just say that it is Luke Skywalker. Come on, guys. It is freaking Luke Skywalker here, guys. Luke Skywalker. He adds so much to this film. He has gravitas. People were like, I don't like the Luke Skywalker character because he's so not like how Luke really was in Return of the Jedi. He wasn't this curmudgeony old man. Yes, that's because that was 30 years ago when it ended. So it's been 30 years. And for me, I actually really like that storyline. I like the fact that he's felt the weight of the whole universe on his shoulders. I love the fact that he was like the chosen one, supposed to be the greatest Jedi in the world, and he's secluded himself on this island. And I actually really like that part of the story. Like he people are saying that's not Luke, and even Mark Hamill himself saying I fundamentally disagree with every single thing in Luke's character. Now, what does that have to say about Rian Johnson? I mean, to me, I was really wary about it once I heard that. When Hamill's saying that about Luke, someone who knows the character of Luke more than anybody, I was like, uh-oh, like, I'm not sure about this. But at the end of the day, he's the actor, and he's not the director, he's not the writer, so it's up to the writers and the directors to make this movie, not the actors. Now, the actors can have a solid idea of who the character is, and if I were to be directing this movie, I would definitely listen to his input, but I would take everything I would take everything from any and all actors with a grain of salt. Like, some new actors can have some great ideas, some old original actors can have some fantastic ideas. You take what works and you build your storyline. So I'm on board with, look, I'm gonna be on board with whatever this writer director does, and I want to give him a fair shot. So that being said, I really like that storyline that Luke's this curmudgeony old man, and it was cool because you get to see him. It was like this whole 360 moment or 180, I don't know, because he reminded me of Obi-Wan back in the day. So when Obi-Wan wasn't necessarily the warmest guy in the world, and he was kind of dry and he didn't really smile that much, and so Obi-Wan, now Luke is kind of the Obi-Wan to Rey. So speaking of which, Daisy Ridley, who played Rey, did I get her picture in here? Well, we all know what she looks like. Let's bring up the poster. Get rid of Luke here. Daisy Ridley, by far excellent actress. She's really good at what she does. You believe it's her at every moment. I believe that she can train to become a Jedi. Very powerful woman, young woman, very strong in her opinion. She, for half the movie, she's like trying to get through to Luke, and Luke's not having it, but she doesn't give up, and that's what I really like about that character. But notice how I say Daisy Ridley and not Rey. Daisy Ridley seems to be doing as much as she can with what she has. The character of Rey, I still don't know, because she only had a little bit of training from Luke on the island. Now all of a sudden she's teaming up with Kylo Ren, and they're doing this crazy mission against Snoke, which, by the way, let's talk about some of the bad things, guys. Well, okay, let's go to the bad things. So, Hux in The Force Awakens was very strong. Like, Hux was a very, very strong character. Okay, so notice Hux in The Last Jedi. He seems like a normal type, like, bad guy. Like, he seems normal. He seems alright. But the way he was acting was just so poor. It was so bad. he like looked like this the whole time, and oh, I am Hux. I'm a bad guy. And it got to the point where it was like, is this a joke? Like halfway through, or halfway, well, as soon as he started talking, actually, I was like, is this a joke? Like he's not actually gonna be like that now, is he? And he was. And there's the scene in the beginning when Poe is trying to get to the base. Excuse me. And he's trying to get to the base. They're trying to distract him and have this thing, and he has to pretend like the reception is going in and out, and he goes, "Oh, I can't hear you. Can you hear me? I can't hear you. What's going on?" And it was something where it was this is Disney movie villain. This is like Airbud villain. This is like kids movie over the top goofy villain, and that completely took me out of it. I'm like, what? Like that is so, it was so goofy, so silly, and like trying so hard to be funny. That really took it out for me, and there were a ton of moments in that when they were trying so hard to be funny versus letting the storyline have comedic elements to it. The difference between these Star Wars and the, if you look at the originals with Harrison Ford, when she goes, when Leia goes to Han Solo, she goes, "I love you," and then he's like, "I know," and it's like you laugh because Han is Han, and that's the type of character he is, and you can't help but laugh because he's just such a badass. And there are so many moments in that where people's charm makes you laugh, not something that's like, "Oh, look at this, this is funny." Get it? Because it's, he's like a bad guy, and he's like can't hear you. He's pretending to not know you, like the transmission isn't coming in. Ha ha ha. Can you hear me now? Good. Ha ha ha. Like I was like, it was like a balloon. I was like so stoked in getting involved in this opening scene where Poe's taking down all the turrets. I remember playing Rogue One, or was it not Rogue One? Rogue Squadron, sorry, Rogue Squadron for N64, and doing that whole thing, flying an X-wing, shooting down the turrets, and I was like, oh, I'm so on board with this. This is so cool. Um, but then they do that joke, and it's like, man, that just, it just killed it for me. Now I wanted to, and the thing is, the fault isn't on the actor. The actor that plays Hux is actually a really good actor. He's in Harry Potter. He was 10 times better in the last movie. If you look at Force Awakens, look at him here. What? Okay, now who's the bad guy? Bottom or top? Bottom, he seems like he could be like my cousin. Let's be real. He could be like my cousin. He could be my brother. He could even be me, right? I could see as like a normal guy, redheaded guy. Look at the guy in the top. It's like, whoa, this dude is evil. This guy is a villain. This guy you do not want to mess with. And the way he was acting was something that was so hateful. And I accredit that to the director, which is J.J. Abrams versus Rian Johnson. Let's face it, if you look at the two directors side by side, and you look at these two movies, yeah, of course it's apples and oranges, but it's the same character, right? And you could tell such a difference between the two. J.J. Abrams has far more experience than Rian Johnson. Rian Johnson has made 4 movies that are well known. Vast of the other movies are completely unknown. Actually, 2 of those movies are known. Looper and Brick. The other ones, name the other ones. Do it. Yeah, you can't. Exactly. And J.J. Abrams has done, he's done Lost, he did Star Trek, he's done so many different things where I I watched Force Awakens and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Even though I saw it, I saw it over 3 times, and yeah, it kind of lost its luster after a couple times, but I still enjoyed watching it. I still had a lot of fun watching it, and people are like, well, it's the same story as The New Hope. Like, yeah, okay, yeah, it is. And that was like my major gripe with Force Awakens, that yeah, okay, it's the same story. But, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They still had a really well executed job. They had what his job was to give Star Wars fans enough of what they know that they like. That Star Wars, we want to see lightsaber battles. We want to see X-ray battles. We want to see these evil villains going after with these good guys. And Force Awakens did a stellar job of that. It was highly entertaining. It was a lot of fun. And the movies. This movie, not so much. This movie, I was bored to tears for half of the movie. And there's a lot of dialogue, and there's a lot of just dumbing down of these characters. This is a prime example. You took a Hux, which was a badass evil villain at the top, and you made him some like normal, like kind of a pussy boy, kind of a little bit of a pussy boy. So that was a lot for me. For me, that was a lot. Okay, let's talk about another thing. All right, let's talk about Snoke. So Snoke was, when The Force Awakens came out, I wasn't a huge fan of Snoke. I thought it was cool how they projected him to be this huge being, and I thought, I'm like, whoa, is this dude just a giant? And then it's like, oh no, he's a hologram. But it's still the fact that he's projected so huge as a hologram makes it, made it like, okay, all right, I'm digging this character. He's an evil villain. People are like, oh, well, we don't even know where he came from. We don't know who he is and where he came. Like, so what? Who cares? We didn't know who Jabba the Hutt was. We didn't know where he came from. We knew he was a bad guy. We knew he was a smuggler. You knew he was a sleazeball in every sense of the term. Do you have to know everything about his childhood? Do we have to see these shots of Jabba the Hutt as a tiny slug, like growing old, getting bigger and stuff? No, we don't have to see that. Same thing with Snoke. You don't have to see his childhood. We don't have to see how he became this charred character. Yeah, people are curious. You wonder, looking at him, like, oh, damn, what the hell happened to this guy? But all you need to know is that he's an evil guy, evil badass villain, and he's a leader. My problem with him wasn't his backstory or lack thereof. I actually like the fact that he didn't have a backstory. I like that. That was one of the stronger points of this. Like, yeah, we don't need a backstory on this guy. The weakness of this guy was, one, he's computer animated poorly. If you look at him, it just looks fake. It looks goofy. It takes me out of it. He looks like a little eggshell, like a cracked eggshell head. Also, it reminded me of the one very famous painting, The Scream. So his face is very similar, like shaped as this. He's like, looks like this abstract painting, and I was just not digging him, and also the fact that, okay, we're going into spoiler territory. Snoke dies, right? So Snoke dies in the movie, and at the time, I thought that it was Kylo Ren and Rey that both kill him at the same time. I thought that they both agreed to do it using the Force, and they chop him in half, which I thought that was cool. But then some people are saying that it was all Kylo that did it. Kylo did it just so that he could become the Supreme Leader. Other people are saying that Rey did it because she's the good person, and she's using her Force against it. Either way, or one of those three options has to be right. I thought it was both of them on the same team. I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments below who actually killed Snoke. And yeah, let me know about that. So he dies really easily. There was one split second where he does the electrocution from his hands, from his fingers. It reminds me of Palpatine, but they were like really badass. It was like super strong. He uses it, and like I think it was on Kylo, and Kylo gets injured pretty badly. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. That's badass. We need more moments of this. We need more moments to show how bad this guy is. You want to make a bad guy bad. You want him to be the villain. You want him to be the strongest villain. Not only that, he's that leader for a reason. We're just seeing him. And in the second scene that we see him, then he dies. Okay. so that took it completely away. So he dies, and it's like, well, wait a second here. Why? Like, why did he die? Like, what? Maybe he could have died more towards the end. Like, I don't know. It seemed to be something that it would build up to, but I mean, he didn't have enough time to shine as a bad guy, and that's what's disappointing. I want to see him be as bad as possible, and not just some guy that was sitting on a throne. Which, by the way, the best part of one of the best part of this movie, at least one of my favorite parts of this whole entire movie was this. So the guards look badass. The the whole layer was just really awesome. It was just it's a really crappy picture, but people that see it, like the whole red layer, like the whole red being with all the lighting and the slick floor, like it looks so cool. It looks so badass. Like that set deck, they deserve. I don't know about an Oscar because I think Blade Runner 2049 was a bit better in all aspects of set deck. Sorry, Star Wars fans, but that was really cool. Seeing that type of set deck was legit, and I'm like, okay, Snoke is in this badass layer. He's about to do some crazy evil shite. Let's see him do it. But instead, he dies. And the one part that I did like was the fact that he said, he's like, you're like a little girl, you're like a little pansy. I forget what he said, but it was pretty funny because it was like thinking he was saying what a lot of the audience people thought and said after Force Awakens. Like, okay, I like Kylo Ren, but he's a bit of a pansy, right? That was like everyone's main problem with Kylo, is that he is kind of a pansy. Like he's a little whiny, little brat. So that's why I'm not a big fan of Kylo, to be honest. I never have been, but I wanted to give him a chance. I wanted to see him get better. I wanted to see him be the bad guy, which for a split second, he fights all the guards with Rey, kills them, right? And then, so we're like, oh, shoot, so there's actually some good in Kylo. There's actually some really good, and maybe Rey is helping him show the good side. And Rey was seeing these visions, which turns out to be Snoke playing with her minds, which I like that aspect. And so Kylo decides to be good for about a minute. They kill all the guards, and he's like, Rey, join the dark side with me. And then she's like, what? She's like, don't do this, right? So that was just like, wait, okay, so he's bad, but then now he's good, but then now he's bad again. I was like, okay. That just took it out for me, and I want to see these villains be bad. Like, I get that he's conflicted earlier in the movie when he was approaching the ship, and we see Leia, right, his mom, and he has the opportunity to blast her, and he doesn't. And then instead, the two TIE fighters on his side come in and they blast her, which I thought that was a cool moment. Like, yeah, that's cool. You see the fact that he's conflicted. You see the fact that maybe he knows that he's going to have backup that's going to blow her up anyway, but he doesn't want to do it himself. Like, I did like that a lot. That was that was a really cool concept. That being said, I wanted him to be bad. I wanted him to be a really bad guy. Like, yeah, he killed his dad, but then he can't kill his mom. So it's like, well, what does that say about him? And you know what? To be fair, it did show that conflict, and you do kind of feel for him, and you know that he's still torn, and but that being said, like, a lot of Star Wars fans are like, well, he's the worst, he's the biggest villain that's ever been, and it's like, I'm like, really? Is he? I mean, because if he was, he probably would have blasted Leia. He probably would have been the one to kill her and finish the job. So we didn't see that. All right, so now we're getting into some more of the ugly stuff. So we're going back. We had something that was really good, right, which is Leia. And speaking of that part, so Kylo Ren blasts the command center. She gets sucked out into space, And that was like, oh my gosh, like holy crap, that was a badass moment. Like, whoa, and but that's war, that's a battle, that's a fight. You can see that, I can understand that. And at that point, my guess was like, I think it was like 30 minutes in to the movie, like, whoa, it's still early in the movie, and then she's getting blasted and she's getting sucked out. You see her body floating into space. I'm like, wow, this is how they're going to do it. This is how they're going to pay respect. To me, that was so cool because we get to see her, we see her body, and it, she's floating through space, and it's almost angelic. It's like, wow, she's angelic. She looks good, and that's a peaceful way. Like she went out fighting. She went out doing what she set out to do, and she got shot up, and that's war. But then we get to the ugly part, the bad part, and the ugly part, and she opens her eyes and then flies like Superman back to the ship and then opens up the gate, and I'm just like, okay, like it was supposed to be one of those moments where it's like, yes, yes, she's back, she's alive, that's so awesome, this is amazing. But it wasn't. Like, I was in a packed audience, and people were like, what? It was just like, wait, what? It, even for Star Wars, when, let's be real, we're dealing with ridiculous things that aren't in our reality as of yet, and so, you have this certain element of, okay, this is fantasy, this is science fiction, yeah, but even for science fiction and fantasy, it was still completely out of place. It was still completely ridiculous, and it was something where I was just like, wait, what? No, no, no. And she gets in the coma. They have a replacement, Miss Purple Hair, and and then we see Leia at the end when she goes, when Finn's like looking at her, and then she's like, "Don't look at me, follow him, follow Poe." And like that's really all she did, all she contributed at the end. That and talking to Luke, which that was a really cool moment. I liked that moment where Luke and Leia are talking on the ship, but it turns out Luke wasn't even there, uh, physically, and yeah, so it was just kind of like, wait, what? Um, she could have gone out in style, in grace, just like that, and fade out, and it would have been a solid way to give tribute to our princess. She went out like a badass. Um, uh, but she did it, and that was what it really just took me out of it, and I'm just like, okay, I mean, really, like I don't know, I wanted again to like this movie so much, and it just tried to be so much, and it tried to have that redemption with her, and it just, we know that since she's actually dead, there's nowhere she can go from here because it's not like she could act in the next movie. People are saying like, well, she shot all her parts before she died. Well, yeah, obviously, but she died a year ago, so it's like they had a year to change the plot or rearrange it in a way that maybe she dies. I mean, if she would have just died in space, it would have been solid. But instead, they try to do that extra thing. And, I mean, so it's like, if you're going to do that, well, why don't you do that with Luke Skywalker? Going again, we got Luke Skywalker. And Luke Skywalker, at the end, he astral projects himself onto the battlefield. And at first you think he's there, and it's like, holy shit, he's finally, he showed up. It was the hero's journey where you deny the call, and then all of a sudden you respond to the call, and he's the ultimate Jedi in the galaxy, about to kick some ass. Ends up he's not even physically there. He can't really do anything. He wouldn't have been able to do anything even if he wanted to. All he did was dodge Kylo Ren's bullets. And then he dodged the whole First Order attack. And it was just like, okay, that's cool that he astrally projected it, but then he disappears and dies. So the only purpose that he served in the last 30 years in the galaxy was to serve as a distraction uh, for 5 minutes, so that the resistance can escape. Like, come on, guys, this is weak. This is just weak storytelling. This is a weak subplot, weak way for him to go out. He didn't go out like a badass. He went out like a little biatch. He meditated on his planet for him to show up on the planet, and then he dies. Like, what? So it's like, if we're gonna follow the logic of Leia, if Leia can wake up from getting blasted into outer space and not getting frozen to death, and uses the Force to propel herself, like, hundreds of yards back into the ship, then Luke can reappear. If he's going to disappear, he can reappear. It's like all bets are off. All bet, you know. Which brings us to Yoda. Yoda was actually a highlight of the movie. I really liked Yoda. Him coming back was really cool. He came back as a mischievous creature that he was in Empire Strikes Back, and that was funny. And you could tell that they made a puppet out of him, and it wasn't computer animated, and that was cool to see. But then he brings down lightning and he burns the tree, where it's like, well, okay, so if he's a ghost, I guess he could summon lightning and then burn a tree. I mean, I don't know. It's just something where when it goes so far out of the realm, so far outside, it takes me away from it. And I'm not against the new direction. I'm not against a new storyline. I like new storylines. I like a new direction. I like a new vision. But a lot of these things were just to try to, one, discount Force Awakens. He kills Snoke. Rey's a nobody, by the way, which actually I liked that. I liked the fact that she was a nobody. Everyone thought that it was Luke Skywalker's daughter, long lost daughter that he had back in his, player days. And I like that. I like the fact that she was a nobody, because that shows that it could be anybody that can have this force power, and she doesn't necessarily have to be some Skywalker, and that was really cool. I really like that part. I'm going to pause this, and then I'm going to resume very soon. Okay, I had to pause there for a second. For a second, as for a freaking couple hours. Oh, gotta adjust here. God, I had to watch the Arsenal game. Arsenal just tied 3-3. Arsenal versus Liverpool. Arsenal was down 2-0, went up 3-2, and then Liverpool equalized it, so 3-3. Anyway, we're not talking about Arsenal. We're talking about Star Wars. What I got right here in front of me is the 3 versions of Yoda from Star Wars that we know. So the top is Yoda from Empire Strikes Back when he appears. So this is the Yoda we all know. This is the Yoda we all love. Middle one is the Yoda from Last Jedi, right? So it looks like it's pretty much the exact same as the Empire Yoda. And then the bottom one, we got the Attack of the Clones Yoda, computer animated, doesn't look the same. It was cool when Yoda was jumping around fighting in Attack of the Clones. That was like the one highlight of that whole movie. Other than that, that movie was pretty boring. That had the middle, people call it middle-itis, which I don't think is a word, but I just invented it right now. Where it's the middle of the trilogy and it doesn't really go anywhere. So the beginning, which is another part of my main problem with this movie, is that at the end they're at the exact same spot as they were at the beginning. So, or even worse off than they were at the beginning. And so that's what was frustrating, is that it seemed like it didn't really have a plan to go anywhere. It didn't want to go anywhere, and it didn't go anywhere. So, but that being said, I did like Yoda's appearance in here, and I like the fact that it was puppet Yoda and it wasn't clone Attack of the Clone computer animated Yoda. They could have easily made him computer animated, which makes, that's why I get so confused. It's like they use Snoke and they completely computer animate Snoke, and they're completely cool with doing that. But then when they show Yoda, it's puppet Yoda. So it's like, why don't you just use? Well, I mean, can you do creature effects on someone to do like gnarly creature effects? I mean, look at Palpatine. Palpatine was he had crazy effects, practical effects on him, and he was terrifying. And again, Palpatine didn't have a background. He did not like. No one knew where he came from. No one cares. And now people are like, "Oh well, I need to know where Snoke's background is." Okay, like no, you don't. Um, just like Yoda, we just know Yoda's cool. Yoda's a great character. We don't really know where he's from. We don't really care. I mean, I'm sure there's a bunch of books. Maybe you guys have read uh, origin stories on Yoda, which I'm sure there's plenty. But point being is there were some choices that I just I guess none of the choices really made sense. Where and I'll give you guys another example. So Finn, towards the end, um, uh, Finn towards the end was flying towards. He was about to save the day. He's flying towards the blaster, about to do a kamikaze, right? And it's like, oh man, this is badass. Like, wow, if Finn goes out like this, it would have been pretty awesome. Like, he freaking saves everyone, blows everything up, sacrificing himself. But at the last minute, Rose comes in there and quote unquote saves the day, which potentially could have and should have killed them both. Should have just like it. Let's be real. Like the ship, one ship hitting another ship, like as it's going towards this, and then another one. Then Rose like smacks him, and then they both fall, and then they're both exposed. The cockpits are open, and the First Order is just staring at them, saying like, okay, let's have their moment. She can give him a little speech, give him a little lecture, and then they can kiss. And the kiss was so awkward. They had no chemistry on screen at all. They seemed like friends, but it didn't seem like lovers. It seemed like she liked him, but he was like, dude, what's your deal, you idiot? I was about to save the day. I was about to sacrifice myself for the greater good. And she's like, I just saved you, dummy. And it's like, okay, well, no, you could have killed him. You both could have and should have killed them both. Uh, but again, it's just a movie, so that's another gripe. It's like certain things. It's like certain things we have to accept. Yeah, it's a freaking movie, and it's Star Wars, and so it's allowed to be out there. It's allowed to be pretty ridiculous. It's allowed to do all that stuff. But where's the line? There doesn't seem to be a line. There's no real barrier. There's no real. Um, it it was just it was just like, okay, well, the rules can be in this little area, unless like Leia gets blown up and flies into outer space. Then she could like fly back the first time she's ever used the Force while she's floating in space. Wouldn't she freeze in like 30 seconds or something? It's just there's just no logic in the movie, and I'm not saying there has to be, but it just took me out of the whole story. It's like every other one, there's logical explanations for everything. Even Rogue One, which I wasn't a huge fan of Rogue One, but there's still a ton of moments that I really liked about Rogue One, and all their choices seem to be, at least at the moment, fairly logical. For this, there was no rhyme or reason. It just seemed like Ryan Johnson was like, "Hey, whatever anyone thinks that they're gonna do, let's just do the opposite, just to do the opposite." So there's no real reason or rhyme nor reason to do it. It was just like, hey, you know how we brought Snoke in last movie? Let's just kill him. You know, um, like how we're bringing Luke in and he's finally getting screen time after getting like 2 seconds of screen time in the first one. Yeah, let's just kill him. But he kills himself. He sacrifices himself, and it just doesn't make sense. I think to a lot of the fans that are really upset because it didn't go the way that they wanted, or it didn't go the way that they were expecting, or it didn't go a way that they thought. Like, that isn't necessarily fair. I think Rian Johnson wanted to do something cool. He wanted to do something unique. He wanted to do something original. But at the end of the day, it just wasn't enjoyable for me. The taking out of logic, the trying to fit in the humor, which every time they tried to be funny, it wasn't funny. Only one time that I can think of that they were really trying to be funny, and it was when Chewie was about to eat a porg, um, and it looked like rotisserie chicken. And then the porgs are like staring at Chewie like, "You're not gonna eat that, are you?" That was funny. If I were directing this movie, I would have had Chewie just like give him give him dirty looks and then eat the hell out of the out of the porg and enjoyed it, you know. And then there'd be a shot of the porgs looking horrified and like, running away. Um, but that's the difference between me and Ryan. Again, like it seemed like it's his version of the world. Thing is with J.J. Abrams' Force Awakens, it all seemed like it was plausible within this world. It all seemed like it was, you know, there was still logic behind it. There was still fun behind it. There was excitement. There was peril. There was ups and downs and everything. And then for this movie, it was just like things happened, and then it's like, okay, like why? In one scene in particular where Luke's on the island and the infamous milking of the alien creature. There's like a big elephant anteater thing, and Luke goes up to the teat and milks it, and it's like green milk, and then he like drinks it, and then he's just like, this is good. It's like, what? I mean, I thought that was funny. That was funny. I'll give it that. And it's cool seeing Luke live as this hermit on this island, But I'm always thinking like, wow, what a waste, because he's, the best Jedi and the only Jedi left, and the last Jedi, right? And he's wasting away on this island, feeling sorry for himself. So, it is an intriguing concept if they were to have had Luke come back and redeem himself at the end. They have a little note. They show the X-wing in the water, and I think it was like for Ryan. He kind of wanted to hint at stuff so you think it would go a certain way, and then just not do certain things. So, for example, when you show the X-wing, like, oh, how did Luke get there? Well, he's got his X-wing, but it's submerged in the water. Oh, it's like Empire Strikes Back when he levitates the X-wing out of the water. Um, you know, it was just, or was that New Hope? I don't know. Um, so it's like, okay, he's gonna redeem himself. He's gonna levitate the X-wing out of the water. He's gonna come in, save the day, which that would have been badass. I mean, I would have loved to have seen that, like seeing Luke come in out of nowhere, blast the AT-ATs, you know. Maybe he gets blasted. He jumps out of the X-wing, goes into where Kylo Ren is. There's a showdown at the end, and then at the end, he pulls an Obi-Wan where he's like, "Hey, if you strike me down, I'll become more powerful than I've ever been." Throwback to Obi-Wan back in the day. He lets he has an intense lightsaber duo, probably critically hurts Kylo, right? Maybe chops his legs off or chops one leg off or something, and then have Kylo kill Luke, and Luke just disappears. And that would have been cool, versus Luke's swan song looking into the sunset, which was a beautiful shot. It's a beautiful shot at the end. The music cues in perfectly and everything, and then he just disappears, and it's just like, what? His whole purpose, Luke's whole purpose, was to show up to be a 5-minute distraction. Like that could have been anybody. They could have programmed C3PO to do that. They could have that could have been it could have been R2D2, it could have been BB-8, it could have been some random droid off the street. It could have been one of those anteater milk dud creatures from Luke's island. It could have been anybody. It really wasn't anything special about Luke's astral projection to show up. And it was so cool, like when they were blasting him, and then, sure enough, he's okay, and he's just like brushing himself off. And I get it. I mean, it makes most sense that he's a ghost, I guess, version of himself, and that he can't get injured. But it was just so ridiculous. And that was the highlight and climax of the whole movie. And at the end, they show these kids talk about the stories of Luke Skywalker, and then one kid uses the Force to use the broom. And it's like, okay, cool. That could have been a hopeful ending for the ninth movie, So let's say, like, the last couple Jedi are there. They're like, hey, we're the last of us. We don't know if there's anyone else. And then they cut to a distant planet, and there's that scene there. And that would have been cool. Then it's like giving hope for the rest, for the next trilogy. Apparently, Rian Johnson's making another Star Wars trilogy, spin-offs, which this is what it felt like. It felt like a Rogue One. It felt like a side story. It felt like an in-between movie. It didn't feel like its own solid Star Wars movie. And again, like, it made the originals, made me really appreciate Force Awakens for what it is, really made me appreciate the originals for what they are, really made me appreciate the prequels even more. It made Attack of the Clones look exciting. Like, I've never been so bored in a Star Wars in my life. I'm sitting there in the theater and I'm like nodding off, like, what is anything important going to happen? No. Oh. So it was just like, when they go to Monaco, I did like, there was a thing that I really liked about them going to Monaco, and that was getting that feeling of a Star Wars characters going into the world and experiencing a world in Star Wars, like the cantina scene, or like, in the Phantom Menace when they go to Tatooine, or when they go to Jakku, or something, when there's those worlds and all the alien creatures and stuff. But instead it was just like, hey, look at all the interesting creatures. Oh, they're gambling. And when I see something that's inspired by stuff on Earth, I get taken out of it. Like the cantina, yeah, it's inspired by a bar, but it was so unique with the band and with all the interesting characters and the feel of it all. Like, it felt like it was an actual tavern. And I believe even in outer space they have taverns and stuff. And maybe there's casinos and stuff like that. But it seemed to be too close to Earth. It was too much of a rip-off of Monaco. It wasn't anything unique. It wasn't anything special. It was a complete side story. It was a complete sidetrack. It didn't have to be in the movie. Let's just face it. It did not have to be in the movie. And then they try to make humor where it's like, ha ha ha, they parked illegally, that's why they're arrested. It's like, really, like, of all things, at least get him something, get him in trouble for something real, Benicio del Toro's character, stuttering, he was fine. He was a fine character. Thing is, he was completely pointless. I liked that part of it, but it didn't make sense, especially because he's like, oh yeah, I'm a hacker, and then he hacks himself out of jail. Like, why didn't you do that before, bro? Like, how many years have you been in there, and then now you're deciding to do it? It's just so much stuff where it just didn't. It's like, if you go along with it, you don't question. Maybe you have a few drinks beforehand. Maybe you smoke weed. You smoke meth beforehand. Just kidding. Don't do drugs, guys. Maybe if you're under the influence of drugs and you just go along with the storyline, it's fun. It's a fun ride. But for me, being stone sober, it was just not enjoyable. It was just not. I don't know. I'm just like, man, this just sucks. Like, throughout the whole movie, and I wanted to like it so bad, and there were some badass scenes. Like, I liked the Salt Planet. The Salt Planet was sick when they move they walk on it and there's the red underneath. At first you think it's blood, but then it's not. It's just like, oh, he's like, oh, it's salt. And it's cool. You look at Luke's footsteps. Oh, he's not making the red. He must be a ghost. Kylo Ren was making the red. He's not a ghost. You know, so stuff like that I really liked, and the speeders on it and starting the red, like visually it looked really cool. Um, but again, it's like that was the final showdown. That was it. Like Luke shows up, he does the Matrix thing. There's like a slow motion lightsaber, which was cool. It looked cool. But like if he was actually there and there was an actual showdown, and another reviewer made this point. It's Half in the Bag by Red Letter Media. I love these guys. These guys are freaking funny. They made a point that no two lightsabers hit each other at all in the movie, which is like, holy crap, you're absolutely right. When Rey and Kylo Ren are in Snoke's lair, they're just killing off all the guards, which that was a highlighted scene. That was cool because there was action. It was a lot of fun. Um, this was like, it was very dialogue driven. The purple haired lady, I forgot her name, didn't care for her. She showed up. She's like, oh, I'm not going to tell you the plans, Poe. And Poe's like, no, tell me the plans. People are like, well, why didn't she just tell him the plans? The thing is, to me, it's like Poe got demoted. She didn't have to tell him the plans. It's not really his business yet. Um, but then when she did say the plan was to evacuate, like, I really like that part when Poe takes control and Poe steps up and is like, "No, lady, we're gonna fight. We're not gonna be cowards." And I really liked that. Like, again, like I liked Poe's character. I like, he's the reckless, shoot first, ask questions later guy. That's what Han Solo was. Han Solo shot first, asked questions later. So, again, like I didn't hate this movie. It was just a disappointment. And the thing is, I didn't even have it's not like I had my hopes super high up anyway. My hopes were I didn't have any hopes. I'm like, hey, I heard it's great. If it is awesome, I'm not gonna get my hopes up though, because it's like you don't want to get your hopes up too high. Like Force Awakens, there's so much hype behind it, and I was the same way. I'm like, I don't want to get my hopes up too high in case I'm going to give it a fair shot. I gave Force Awakens a fair shot. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Yeah, it's not a perfect movie. Yeah, it's the same exact movie as A New Hope, but it still had enough new stuff and enough old stuff to go back and to watch it again and again. I saw it 3 times in the theaters. I'm probably going to see Last Jedi again. I'll probably see it 1 time, maybe 2 more times if I can make it through the second time. Give it another shot, excuse me, but it was just, I don't know, it's just like I talked to a lot of other people and they're like, yeah, dude, I just wasn't feeling it with this one. And like I understand why he made all these decisions, and it's not those decisions that made it a bad movie. It was just the feel of the movie, the tone of the movie. It didn't really suck me in at all. It was just like stuff happened and then more stuff happens and then nothing happens, and then it was just oh it was just a bad movie. So basically, really, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I really wanted to say or needed to say. Yeah, it was just a bad movie. I didn't enjoy it, and like, hey, if you like the movie, that's great. I'm happy for you. But just because it's Star Wars, like I love Star Wars just as much as anybody, but I love it enough to say, hey, Star Wars, you're kind of messing up right now. We need someone with vision, someone with an actual grasp of Star Wars, of what the fans really want to see. I know I don't doubt Ryan Johnson's a big fan, but he's just not. I'm hopeful for J.J. Abrams. I think J.J. Abrams is going to come back and knock it out of the park. I really do. I think he's going to bring it back and make an enjoyable movie. It doesn't have to be completely original, like Force Awakens was pretty much 30% original, but that 30% originality was enough, right? Like this was trying to be 100% original, but ended up being 0% fun. And again, like I love originality. It wasn't like it was a bad movie, but it wasn't terrible. I didn't hate it, right? I recommend to see it, But overall, I give Star Wars: The Last Jedi. I'll be lenient on it, and I'll give it. No, no, no. I'll give it 1.5 stars out of 5, and that's being pretty generous. Almost gave it 2 stars out of 5. That would be super generous. Like 1.5 stars, though, is really what it deserves. Um, it was just not a good movie, guys, and it was about an hour and a half too long. It was like an episode. It felt like a TV pilot. At most of the times, it felt like a TV pilot. It felt like an episode of Star Trek, where they're just on the ship and there's just a bunch of dialogue, and it was just like, yeah, most, like, if you look at the prequels, yeah, there's a lot of dialogue in the whole, there's a ton of dialogue. People just standing around talking, which is fine. This is what I'm doing. I'm sitting around talking. This review is probably way too long. But, like, you guys feel me? I mean, it's like, if you liked it, what did you like about it? I don't know. It's like trying to find more stuff that I like about it, but I'm gonna give it another shot. I'm gonna see it again, and I was just bummed, man. After the first 15 minutes, when General Hux was just like, "Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Oh, maybe check the connection. Check the connection." It's like, no. There were so many times when it just felt like a joke. It felt like a bad joke. I felt like I was in a bad dream. Like it wasn't. Uh, just wasn't a good movie. Anyway, had to get this out of here, out of there. I'm trying to think of anything else. I think that pretty much covers it. What did you guys think of The Last Jedi? Leave your comment, leave your rating in the comments below. I think I'm going to do it out of 5 stars from now on, guys. So I give it a 3 out of 10. It was pretty bad. It was bad. Had enjoyable moments, had some cool parts about it, but overall was a pretty bad movie. So there you guys have it. That's my review. If you guys want to see more reviews, what shall I review? Leave that in comments below. I've seen a lot of the movies that are out. Also, I have a big announcement about Rideshare, guys. Rideshare movie coming soon, arriving soon. So hit that like button if you like this video. Subscribe for more videos. What did you think of Last Jedi? Leave that in the comments below. What star rating would you give it out of 5? It's got to be out of 5. Or whatever. It could be out of whatever you want it to be. Leave that in the comments below. What did you think about it? I'd love to talk about it. I'd love to get a conversation going. I forgot to mention. So Harley Morenstein is a awesome YouTuber, friend of mine, and we had a healthy debate on Facebook about Star Wars, and I'm like, dude, this movie's just bad. And he was there explaining, justifying all the reasons why, and he makes really good points. So check out his video. Just type in Harley Morenstein, Star Wars Last Jedi. He's got over an hour plus long review of it. And you can tell he really likes Star Wars. He loves Star Wars. He's really passionate about it. He has a really good case for why it's a good movie. But even with him making it a great case, to me, I can't take my experience away. Like, I was primed, ready to see this movie. I sat in the perfect seat in a great theater. Like, there was nothing getting in the way of it. Yeah, it was just a bad movie, guys. It was just a bad movie. So let's hope episode 9, only place to go is up. I really hope Rian Johnson gets fired. I'm sorry, dude. Like, he seems like a nice guy. I don't want to see him direct another Star Wars. I don't want to see him write another Star Wars. I just don't. Let's give it to more talented filmmakers. Oh, also, if you guys want to see a solid sci-fi sequel from this year, from a movie that's over 30 years old, like Star Wars. Star Wars is 40 years old now. But check out Blade Runner 2049. Blade Runner 2049 is an example of what a sequel should do. An example of a real filmmaker taking what worked with the last one, getting it in that world, sucking us into this world, and then putting enough new stuff and a whole new storyline to follow. And like that movie is like 2.5 hours or maybe even 3 hours, but I am involved every single second of the way. Blade Runner 2049 is an excellent film. Check that movie out. If you only have to see one sci-fi movie this year, see that movie. Don't see this movie. But of course, see both. You'll probably see both. Or you might have already seen Star Wars by now. But if you haven't seen Blade Runner 2049, give it a shot. It's a real movie. It's a good movie from a real filmmaker. Not that Rian Johnson isn't a real filmmaker, but he just wasn't. It just didn't work for me for this one. So. Alright guys, what do you guys think? Leave that in the comments below. I'm going to actually end this video for now. Subscribe, like, comment, rate. Big news for rideshare coming soon. Love you guys. Peace. Bye.